Welcome, everybody. This is Julie Harrison. I am with the Office of Developmental Disability Services in Salem, and one of my primary responsibilities is to work with the eXPRS payment system. A lot of work I do is involved with user support and training on how to use the payment system, which is why we are here today. What I have to share with you all today is a couple of presentations specifically for DD agency providers on the eXPRS billings, claims, and payments process. It's an overview. We're not going to go into a lot of micro detail, but give you kind of a high level understanding of the process and the systems. This is probably good for providers that are newer to using eXPRS, and also a good review for those providers that have been using eXPRS for a number of years. It's always good to get a refresher on how things are structured. I have two presentations to share with you guys today. This one on the payment process overview, and then we'll take a break and ask questions. Since I have everybody in listen only mode, I'm going to ask that if you do have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to send them to me in the questions option on your little dashboard for the webinar. There should be a section in there for questions. And if you expand that section, then you can write your question, and then when we take a break in between sessions, I will go through that list of questions and get those answered for you guys, hopefully. The second presentation I have to share with you guys today is around payment reductions for provider liability or client liability. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail on those things that may impact your payments a bit. In terms of other housekeeping stuff, this with questions and answers, excuse me, this takes about an hour to an hour and a half. So hopefully everybody will be able to stick it with us for the whole time. And I am recording this session as well, so I'll be able to have this available for people once I figure out where to post it for you to come back and refer to it later. So why don't we just get going? Also drank something that's making my throat a little annoyed. So let's just launch right in and get started talking about billings, claims, and payments, an overview for agency providers. So in eXPRS, the payment system that you're all using, there are two particular processes for agency providers inside the system for how you bill for the services that you've provided. There are the process for direct service claims that you actually create the claim itself. And those are usually for the CPA authorized services such as residential care. And then there's the plan of care service delivered billing entries, which is the other process. And we'll talk about both of these in detail. So let's move right along. Let's first talk about direct service claims. And this process for billing for agency providers is used for you to bill for residential group home services, such as service element 50 adult group homes or service element 142 kids group homes, for your supported living services if that's what you provide, as well as some transportation services that are authorized in a monthly client prior authorization or a CPA. For these services, you as an agency provider would go in and create in the system a direct claim to receive payment for the services that you've provided for these particular services. In eXPRS, you have menu options to get to those claims pages that you would use. And once you've logged into eXPRS on your home page, you would select from the left-hand yellow menu the option of claims, which activates a flyout menu, and then you would also select create claims if you wanted to go in and actually create those claims so you can get paid. I won't go into specific detail about the step-by-step process for creating claims just because of time, but do know that there are how-to guides on the help menu that will walk you through that process step by step by step in the detail that you would need to actually do it for the first time or the first few times if you're not familiar with the process. And I'll show you how to access that help menu towards the end of this presentation. Direct service claims also allows you to bill for absence days for residential services. There's ODDS policy that allows agency providers to receive payment for up to 21 days in a fiscal year, even though the client may be absent from your service temporarily for a particular reason. And those reasons are defined. We'll talk about those in just a second. And those absence claims, when you create those absence claims, you're going to pick a specific modifier on the claim to tell us why the individual is absent from your service. Okay, so you can still get paid for those days. The absence claim modifier just enables the system to be able to identify that as a client absence from service, so we don't collect the Medicaid match from the federal government. You still get paid what you're owed to get paid. It's just so we don't claim that federal Medicaid match funding from the federal government. The absence claim modifiers that are currently in the system available for use right now are shown here. REG is a regular claim, meaning the client is present and they received your service just as normal. AWL means that they're absent without supervision. Perhaps you have somebody that likes to go to 7-Eleven without permission and they take off for a bit. Or jail, JAL means that they're in detention or jail without supervision. FAM is used when the individual is absent because they're visiting family without your support. Now, if you have a staff person that's going with the individual home because they need your staff support to visit family, and you have a staff that's going with them, you're still providing service, and so that would be a regular claim. It's when they go visit family and you don't have any staff that is going with them. You're not providing any care at that point. Same with vacation, VAC, vacation without provider support. We do know we have providers that take individuals on vacation and provide support to them while they are on vacation, which is fabulous. Again, if you have a staff that's providing support while they're on vacation, that would be a regular claim, even though they're out and about doing some fun stuff, maybe camping or something of that nature. MED, admitted to a medical hospital. So that would be used if they were admitted to a medical hospital and you weren't providing any direct support to the individual in the hospital. That's a recent policy change. That if you are able to have a staff with them in the hospital, if you do that, then that would be a regular claim, I believe, is what the policy direction is. PSY is if they're admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and NFS is meaning they're admitted to a skilled nursing facility for short-term convalescence or rehabilitation stay. So again, depending on the type of absence the individual is experiencing, then you would pick the applicable modifier to tell us that information when you're billing for those absence days. There's a separate screen to bill for those absence claims, and you get to it again from the claims menu from the left hand. Again, clicking on claims with the flyout menu, you would select the option create absence claims. And again, I'm not going to go into specific step-by-step detail on that today. There is how-to guides on the help menu that walk you through how to do absence claims. I will let you know that if you're claiming for a number of individuals all at one time, which eXPRS will allow you to do, a best practice, it would be to submit your absence claims for those individuals that you know have been absent for that period of time. Do those first, and then do regular claiming for everybody else. That way you don't run into an issue where you have to correct someone's claim because they had absences in a period of time and you mistakenly claimed for the whole month for them. Other services that you provide as an agency provider that are authorized in the Plan of Care module, you don't actually create the claims for those services. What you are entering in the system for billing purposes is what we call a service delivered or an SD billing entry. And those SD billing entries are the billing component that you use for in-home attendant care services if you're providing that, in-home daily relief care services, hourly employment services in general, day support activity services, Plan of Care authorized transportation services such as mileage, or if you're an agency that also provides professional behavior support services, all of these are authorized in the plan of care structure. And so their billing is that you submit to the system is a service delivered billing. It's not a claim. The claims are specifically for CPA services or residential cares. Now, even with the service delivered, so you have some options on how you can get your service delivered billing entries into the system. And again, if you serve a lot of individuals and the service delivereds are more micro level data, you're going to have a lot of those that you're managing. So for agency providers, you have a couple of methods available in eXPRS to get your service delivered billing entries created. Also keeping in mind that there are some methods that are specifically required for a specific type of service, such as EVV for attendant care type services. That an EVV method is required for billing for those attendant care type services, and we'll touch on that in just a little bit as well. But for agency providers, if you're doing your service delivered billing entry work using the regular Express desktop website, you have a couple of options. You can create your SD billings for a single client service authorization, which is a nice advantage because it allows you to bill for multiple dates for that one individual specific service. So if you have an attendant care service for an individual, you can bill all the dates in a month that attendant care services will provide it to that individual at one time. But that is an individual client, individual service entry method. Agency providers also have the ability to create SD billings for a single date, a specific calendar date. But under this method, that allows you to bill for multiple clients and multiple services that all took a place on that single date. And depending on your internal business processes as an agency, you get to pick which method you'd like to use. And you can use a combination of both methods based on the particular situation that you have to bill for. You're not locked into picking one and then not being able to utilize the others, which is a nice flexible feature in the system. Again, as I said, eXPRS has an EVV method, or as an agency provider, you can select your own EVV solution. I know some agencies are using TheraP for their EVV. Other agencies are using, I think, T-Sheets for EVV. And some agencies are using the eXPRS EVV option. Again, as an agency, you get to make that determination for yourself. But some type of EVV system process needs to be used when you bill for in-home attendant care services. And this is because of the EVV requirements that stipulate that attendant care services need to be documented at the time the service is occurring in real time. And we also must capture the service location in real time where that service is beginning and ending. And so that's all part of those EVV, electronic visit verification, federal regulation requirements that we have to meet. The final process that agencies have available to them is what we call the SD import process. You may also hear this as the batch upload process. And that allows for the upload of a specifically formatted CSV Excel file with all your SD billing data in individual rows for hourly services, including EVV services. You can upload all of that billing data via a spreadsheet to eXPRS to create your draft SD billings. So you don't have to manually sit down at a computer and key those in line by line by line. It's a nice process. It will accommodate EVV attendant care services as well as hourly employment services, hourly DSA services. The SD import process does not support mileage, and it does not support residential care services, only plan of care hourly services. And so some agency providers that are using their own EVV solutions, such as TheraP or T-Sheets or some other system that's not the eXPRS EVV option, they would use their own internal process. That internal process they will have worked to configure to produce this CSV file of all the billings and then they would upload their CSV file, once a week, a couple times a month, whatever frequency that they choose to per their business processes, to create all those draft SD billings. Once those draft billings are in Express, then they can go in and submit those as a batch all at once. This saves a little bit of data entry time. And if you don't have access or information about the agency SD import process and you're curious about that, you'd like to look into it, there are how-to guides on the help menu that outline that whole process for you. So take a look at that. There's plenty of information to explain how it works and what you would need to do within your own internal system to produce that CSV file that Express will accept as an upload. So the first option that you have, like I said, is creating an SD billing for a single client service authorization. To do that manually in the desktop. And to do that, you would click on Plan of Care, which activates the flyout service delivered, and then you would click on Create Service Delivered Entry from a single authorization. And then that takes you to the page where you find those authorizations you want to bill against for the individual, and then you can go into the billing pages. Again, step by step, I'm not going to cover today just because it's way too much detail, but again, there are how-to guides on the help menu that walk you through each process and in very explicit step-by-step procedures for that. To bill for the single date, the same date for everybody, you can use that from the claims menu from your home screen, clicking on claims and then create POC daily service delivered. And then that takes you to the page where you can select the specific date, calendar date you're billing for. You get a list of your authorizations that are active for that date, and then you can multiple clients, multiple services you can bill for, and the service date will be the same for everybody that you're selecting on that page. So you can bill for Monday, today, or Tuesday, September 1st. Everybody, all the services we provided to everybody on September 1st, you can do that in one batch and create those draft billings that way. And again, there is a how-to guide that walks you through how to do that step by step on the help menu. For the SD import process, again, under Plan of Care and Service Delivered, if you have the specific user role to do the SD importing into Express, you'll have that menu option, Service Delivered Batch Import, available, which takes you to a screen where you can then browse for that CSV file that you've created from your own internal system saved. And then you just find that file that's saved on your computer, upload it to Express, and then via that upload process creates the draft SD billings for you to then go in and view those and submit those for payment processing. And again, there's how-to guides that outline the step-by-step process for doing that SD import. Now, Plan of Care services do have claims, but those claims are not something that you create, unlike what you do for residential services. For Plan of Care services with your SD billing entries, the system creates the claims for you on your behalf. And that is created through a system process that we call the claims aggregation process. And how that works is that for your SD billing entries that have been submitted and cleared all the validation checks to be okay to pay, once they have cleared all that, they moved to a status of approved. And then each weeknight, Express will go in and look for agency service delivered billings that are in approved status. The system will then automatically gather up those billings, put those billings into a claim for payment. So you may have multiple SD billings in a single claim, and then processes those claims through its validation checks to make sure the claims are okay to pay. And then it's that claim that gets processed that will send you your payment for the services you've provided. So the claims piece is what is created by the system for you for Plan of Care services. So for the claims that you would submit yourself for residential services, group homes, supported living, or the claims and the SD processes that is created for Plan of Care, all of those claims and or SD billings that are in approved status gets processed by the system for agency providers, like I said, each business day, overnight each business day. And so for claims that are then cleared to be okay to pay and have themselves a status of approved, payment is usually processed and received by you as an agency within 2 to 3 business days after submission. And that works if you're using direct deposit or the automatic clearinghouse funds transfer. If you're still getting paper checks sent from the Department of Treasury, then it may take a bit longer. We say give it 3 to 10 business days after you've submitted your claims and they've been approved for payment for you to see those checks. We definitely encourage providers to take advantage of the direct deposit ACH process just because things move a lot quicker for you to get your funds, and it's more secure. You don't have checks going missing waywards in the postal mail. Payment issues. So as providers, you probably have figured out that sometimes things happen and you don't get paid 100% of what you thought you were going to get paid. And that's probably because of some things that may have happened that kept your claim from moving to approved status to pay. Only SD billings or claims that are in approved status will be processed for payment by Express. But there are times where you may have service delivered billings and or claims that are suspended in the system. And because they suspended, they did not complete that process for payment. And we cannot finish that process to pay you that until that suspension reason is resolved. So only things in approved status, claims and or billings, will get processed to be paid to you out of Express. Now, there's a variety of reasons that an SD billing and or a claim may suspend. There's a long litany, a list of validation checks that they all go through every time they're submitted and processed for payment. But let's talk about the more common reasons that you're gonna run into potentially. The most common reason that an SD billing and or a claim may suspend and not complete that payment process is usually due to a client eligibility issue. And so the error message will be client eligibility, no client eligibility of some statement of that effect. Now, you'll see that sometimes when an individual has to have their annual medical card eligibility redetermined and something gets snagged in that process. And so their service eligibility is okay, meaning they're okay on the K plan or the waiver, but their medical financial eligibility is out of sync. And sometimes that can change in between the time you submitted the SD billing and then the time the system aggregates and processes your claims. If the medical card financial eligibility and the individual's service eligibility is out of sync, then that claim is going to suspend because Express doesn't know how to finish processing it. And it needs our assistance to figure that piece out. And sometimes you may need to do a technical assistance request to us to help you figure out why something's suspended. There are troubleshooting matrix guides on Express to kind of help you troubleshoot that, but sometimes those error messages can still be confusing, and you can certainly reach out for assistance when you need it. There are other times, though, as a part of that claims and service delivered validation process that Express goes through to validate whether that SD billing and or its claim is okay to pay, Express has to gather pieces of data from a variety of different places, including other DHS mainframe systems such as MMIS, which is the Medicaid information system, Medicaid Management Information System. And that's where the individual's financial medical card eligibility lives, since that's managed through the Oregon Health Plan. But sometimes that MMIS system is busy. And when Express connects with MMIS to get the information, Express may go over and knock on the door to MMIS saying, hey, can you give me this information for this individual? But if the MMIS system is busy and doesn't answer Express or connect with Express so Express can retrieve that data it needs, Express will assume that the answer is no. meaning that the client does not have the needed eligibility information that eXPRS requires to finish processing that claim. And so we'll suspend that claim because eXPRS isn't sure what to do with it, since that answer is assumed to be no. We don't want to expend and claim Medicaid matching funds in error if we can avoid it. So that's why that's kind of a stopgap there. Sometimes if it's a connectivity issue with MMIS, if you just wait a few minutes and resubmit your billing or your claim again, the system then can connect and finish the processes. But if not, eXPRS attempts to resubmit anything that is suspended overnight automatically for you to see if those suspense reasons have resolved on their own, and then if so, we update that information, and then your billing or claim will finish that process to be okay to pay. Another issue, suspension issue that's pretty common that we see is when your billing or your claim overlaps or is a duplicate of a billing or claim from another provider, or for yourself. Perhaps you submitted a billing or claim and you forgot that you had done that for an individual, so you submitted it a second time. Now, for SD billings or claims that are overlapping or a duplicate for between you and another agency provider or another personal support worker provider, if the overlap of the SD billings for Plan of Care services is less than 15 minutes, eXPRS will allow that. Things should process through without too much of an issue. Because we expect that there may be times that the two providers, you may need to chat with each other, especially if you're doing some kind of shift change or care transfer during the day. Overlapping claims, SD billings between two different providers that are more than 15 minutes, those will suspend as a suspected duplicate, so we can validate, oh, did somebody enter in a wrong end time or a start time, or what corrections need to be made to reduce that overlap to less than 15 minutes, 15 minutes or less. If you have a billing for yourself as an agency for the same client that overlaps even 1 minute, then the system's going to deny that, because you can't, as an agency provider, bill for the same person for the same service for the same time. That's definitely a duplicate. So you will see those overlapping or potential duplicate billings, and that would be why something either suspends or potentially denies for you. And again, the suspension reason is listed on the SD billing, and then you can use those troubleshooting matrix guides to figure out what's really going on, what has snagged that particular billing. Other stuff that may suspend your billings is if the SD billing or the claim wasn't submitted within the required Medicaid billing timelines. So per Medicaid rules, and the majority of the services that we have for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities is funded, at least in part, by Medicaid. We have to abide by their regulations to make sure we receive those Medicaid funds. And so the Medicaid regulations say that a provider has up to 12 months from the date of service to submit their initial billing or claim for payment for that service. So if you're getting your billings done within 12 months, so today's September 1st of 2020, you have until September 1st of 2021 to bill for services provided today. Now, it's likely that agency providers aren't waiting a whole year to get paid for the services they provide, especially agencies that are smaller, because you need the cash flow to come in to pay your staff for sure. But some of those larger agencies, sometimes billing for a specific client may fall through the cracks. So you may want to set up some QA processes within your own agency to make sure that you're viewing and making sure you're getting paid for everything that you expect to get paid for, and then reach out if you see something that isn't lining up for you. Now, there may be situations where you are unable to bill. It takes a long time to get an authorization put in place. A person has a really complicated eligibility requirements or something. And so from 12 months to 18 months from the date of service, if you submit that initial billing or claim for payment, that will suspend, and then ODDS needs to take a review that information to see if it's still okay to pay, since it's outside that initial 12-month window that Medicaid requires providers to get their initial claims or billings submitted for payment. It could be, the reason could very well be completely out of your control. And so we just want to take a look at that. Unfortunately, because of Medicaid rules, anything after 18 months from the date of service will be denied. Medicaid says that the payments can't be issued for anything over 18 months from the date of service. So definitely if you haven't already, have some internal QA processes to look at your billings periodically to make sure that you've got everything billed that you expected to bill and get paid for. And nothing's out there suspended or hanging up and you need to get resolved. Definitely take a look at that, and then reach out and do a technical assistance request if you've got billings or claims that are snagged up and haven't paid and you need some assistance to get those resolved. We can certainly do our best to help you with that. Now, there may be times that you've submitted SD billings or claims because the information you had at the time, perhaps it's an admin person that's doing your billing for you, got that information from someone else, and they do the billing, and then it turns out that that actual information needs to be corrected. As an agency provider, as particularly those staff at your agency that have the claims manager user role assigned to them, have the ability to make corrections to your SD billings or your residential service claims if needed. So for direct service claims, like for group home services or supported living, the provider claims manager has permissions to correct or void a claim and then submit a new one or adjust it to reflect the corrected information, and then those new claims will get reprocessed. For plan of care services that you use an SD billing for as the billing component, the claim itself you would not void or correct. It would be the specific SD billing entry that you would need to void. Perhaps you did an SD billing for August 12th and you meant to make that for August 22nd. You miskeyed it. It happens. Then you would avoid the actual SD billing entry that's wrong, create a new SD billing with the corrected data. And that SD billing correction work actually in the next claims aggregation cycle will trigger the system to correct the associated claims. For the claim with the SD billing that was voided, that claim gets corrected. All those other SDs get released. Any new SDs that are put in as a replacement, all of those SDs get gathered up again and then put into a new corrected claim, and then that's processed for payment. And then depending on the difference between the old claim that was corrected and the new claim that was created in its place will determine whether you have a provider liability that will need to be recovered from future payments or not. And that understanding that liability process is the presentation that we'll talk about in a little bit. In terms of talking about payment reductions, there are a few reasons that your payment as an agency provider out of eXPRS may be reduced, meaning you get less money in your deposit than you had originally billed for. And like I said, one reason would be that you had a provider liability amount recovered from that payment, meaning you were paid for something in the past that was later voided, so you owe us that money back. We're going to hold that money back you owe us from a future payment. So that's the PLA process, and we'll talk about that in detail in a bit. For individuals that live in group home or supported living services, depending on their financial eligibility status, the client may have a liability or a service contribution that they have to pay towards the cost of their residential care. Agency providers, you may also know this as the offset, but it's the Medicaid required amount that an individual, based on their financial eligibility, not all clients have to pay a service contribution or client liability, but some do. And that is in addition to their room and board, And those payments are taken off the first payment to the provider in the month, since that needs to be collected from the individual. And again, we'll talk about more of that in detail in a few minutes. There may be other payment deductions that are removed from your payments. Perhaps you have a lien through revenue, or there's a Department of Justice garnishment of some sort that may ultimately reduce your payment once it leaves Express and goes through the Treasury or Revenue Department. Unfortunately, those payment reductions are handled outside of Express. And so since Express did not generate or handle that payment reduction, there's no information in an Express as to why that was taken out of your system, of your payment. But if you find stuff like that and you're unsure, we can hopefully we can see if we can ask some questions to potentially find out what's going on. I would hope that you would know as an agency provider if you have a revenue for tax, maybe you've got tax set up to pay or something of that nature, that you would know that that would be coming. But that would be the other type of deduction that could potentially reduce your payments. That's different than a provider liability or a client liability. Now we're talking a lot about a lot of data and information in Express. And so we try to have some resources available to you in the system to help you find that information, so you can manage your own books as an agency for your own financial purposes. And we do that through a lot of ways, and one way is through using payment reports. We have a number of reports in the system that are available to agency providers. I'm going to talk about briefly about 4 reports that may be useful for you, but that this is not the extent of all the reports that are in Express. You may find other reports that you like better. By all means, use whatever report that you like, that makes sense to you, that gets you the data you need. A lot of these reports will generate the same data, but just present it in a different way. So it may be, apples to oranges or whatever, might be easier for you to understand the information if it's presented in one way versus another. So we tried to make the system have some variety and options for you based on how your particular business is set up for your own internal bookkeeping processes. So the 4 reports that I'm going to talk about today that are usually the most commonly used by agency providers to track their payments is the payment detail report, the suspended claims report, the remittance advice in Express, and the client liability report. And again, I'm going to touch on these briefly, and I won't go into extensive detail. Again, there's individual how-to guides for each of these reports to walk you through how to access the report and read the data. The payment detail report will list out for a particular payment run the services that you were paid for. It starts out as a summary report, and then you can drill down to more detail inside the report. It's really kind of a nice report. I like using it myself. You can find that from the left-hand menu under reports, and then from the flyout, select payment detail. And this is an example of what the first level summary report is. It gives you a payment run, and then it kind of itemizes by service element how much you had submitted in approved claims, if you had any provider liability deducted from that particular payment, and then what your net payment is. And then if you have multiple services that are in a particular payment run, you'll see them kind of listed here as well. To see all the individual claims that went in to make up a particular payment line, like the one here that's circled in pink for the service element 50 payment of $68,718 and change. If you wanted to look at all the individual service element 50 group home claims that went in to make up that claims total, you would click on the claims detail hyperlink that's circled in pink there, and that takes you to a sub-report, which then gives you an itemized list of every claim when totaled up makes that summarized total amount. And then all of these reports are all exportable to an Excel format if you wanted to track those and save that sub-report detail so you can manipulate it later, which is kind of nice. In addition to that, if you happen to have a liability that's recovered from, and again, we'll talk about this a little bit in more detail later, but if you happen to have a provider liability recovered from a particular payment line, here for the second one, service element 50, you had $2,886 in approved claims, but $188.62 was held back, giving you a net payment of $26.97. If you wanted to see which claim was voided and then the new claim that replaced it to recover that $182.62, you'd click on the PLA, Provider Liability Account detail link there for that particular payment line. And then that will take you down to the sub-report for the PLA detail. And it'll show you outlined in red there, that's the claim that was paid to you, but then later voided for Ray Manta, that created the liability amount of $188.62. And then it shows you the next claim outlined in blue that offset that PLA amount from Chris Bacon. Chris's claim was $359, but $188 was held back out of that $359. So that was the particular claim that was used to recover that $188.62 liability that was owing to you. The suspended claim report, this might be useful for you if you have claims that are suspended and you want a quick look to see A, if you have claims that are suspended, and B, if you do, what's the reason, why are those claims suspended? And this report gives you kind of a nice snapshot of that. If you run this report and the returns no data found, that means you don't have any suspended claims for the date range that you selected. But to take a look at this report, again, it has its own how-to guide. From the reports menu on the left, click on reports to fly out and then select the suspended claim option. And then when that report comes back in the system, it'll give you a list of the summary list of the claims and the reason, what's the validation rule that got triggered because of the suspended claim. You can see here that for the first line for service element 50 claims, you've got 3 claims that are suspended as a suspected duplicate. The date range or a portion of the date range overlaps an approved claim. So this particular provider has 3 group home claims that are suspended because they're potentially a suspected duplicate. And the last audit item, this particular provider has 185 residential claims that are suspended because the absence modifier they used, that claim exceeds the fiscal year's limit of 21. And again, if you click on any of the particular blue text there, which is a hyperlink, will take you down. So for the claim modifier, fiscal year's day limit exceeded, error rule that suspended the claims, those 185 claims. If you click on that link, it'll take you to a sub-report to show you each of those individual claims that have been suspended for that particular rule reason. And again, this is exportable to Excel if you want to use that. So you can see which claims did you submit that are outside the number of 21 days that you're allowed for a fiscal year, for example. The remittance advice is a report in eXPRS that providers can access. It acts like a really large check stub that gives you an itemized list of all the claims processed in that particular payment run and then your total payment. The remittance advice can be a very, very large report with lots of pages of lots of detail. The payment detail report is kind of a really nice summarized version of the remittance advice. But some people like to use the remittance advice because it gives you all of that raw data, which is great. Use the report that you like that works good for you. But if you're going to use the remittance advice, the thing I would suggest to people is to save you some time is to jump to the last couple of pages of the report. because that's where you'll see the summary pages. All the preliminary pages up to then are it's all that individual claims, raw claims data in that payment run. And it can be many, many, many pages if you've submitted a month's worth of claims for a large agency that serves several hundred people. But if, like I said, if you select that report and then go to the last page, you get a summary of everything that's been itemized out in that remittance advice report. And it's the same information, it just may be presented a little bit, formatted a little bit differently. And here we're looking at this particular provider for the run ID on February 7th or April 17th. They had a total of 145 claims. The amount submitted, how much was approved, it gives you a number that were suspended, that were not paid, and it gives you a total. And then it shows you if you had a provider adjustment for a provider liability amount, and then what your net payment total would be for that payment run for all of that. So it gives you kind of a balance sheet of all that, the raw claims data that's contained inside the remittance advice report. The last payment report that I wanted to share with you is client liability report, and this is good for agency providers that have group homes or supported living. You may want to run this so you can see the report of all the individuals that may have a service contribution to pay towards the cost of their residential care each month, and then how much that is. So you know how much you need to be collecting from the individual along with their room and board. And so from the left-hand menu under reports, you would select the flyout option, client liability. And then from the report returns, it'll give you for each client that's enrolled in that particular group home service or supported living service, if they have a liability amount. It'll either say 0 if they don't have a liability amount, or it'll show the correct liability amount that you need to collect from them as a dollar figure. So this is a good report to pull to check to see which clients have a liability and then how much that is that you need to be collecting from them at the first of each month, along with their room and board. It's also good because some individuals will have a liability and then their financial eligibility will change. Perhaps that they'll get connected with employed persons with disability program, which then makes them financially Medicaid eligible, and so their liability is reduced to 0. They just have a participant fee to pay. Sometimes that eligibility information can get delayed, or the system cannot pick up on that, and so people will get charged a liability when they actually shouldn't be paying a liability. So you want to check that to make sure that nothing like that has happened. If an individual is getting charged for a liability and they shouldn't have one, then you definitely would want to reach out with a technical assistance request and get that resolved. We can work with you guys to get that resolved. So then you would get paid the full amount for that individual services out of the system, since the client does not have to pay. We have resources for you to work through your payment stuff. As I said, there's a lot of how-to user assistance guides on the help menu in eXPRS. Many of them walk you through each particular function in eXPRS in step-by-step detail. How to submit a claim, how to submit a service delivered, how to do your batch import, SD import upload. Step-by-step process, and with screenshots and instructions that are detailed. So please and plus there's other resources. There's problem solving matrices, there's rate breakdowns, there's a lot of system information on the help menu, and I would definitely encourage people to spend some time, if you can carve out, maybe put an appointment on your calendar that you're going to spend some time working through and looking at all those resources on the eXPRS help menu. I think that will be time well spent for you to get familiar with what those guides are, so you can make use of them to really save you some headache and heartache if something doesn't happen to work out quite as you expected when you're using the system. But the Express Help Menu website address is listed there. It is it's not secured, so you do not have to be logged into Express to get to the help menu. You can get to it externally if you need to, which is nice. We also have the provider resources page that the Office of DD Services manages, and that contains a lot of policy information and directives about how do you bill during the COVID period, and what about exceptions and all the other policy stuff and rules and regulations and expenditure guidelines and all of that additional information that Express is designed to support, but may not have all the detail that you need around the policies. That lives on the provider resources page, and there's the website address for that as well. So definitely take a look at that because there's lots of information there that I think will help you as a provider know all the things that you need to know about doing business in terms of within the parameters of ODDS policy and guidelines. And one other link is the ODDS policy information and transmittals page. I know we've done a lot of communication to agency providers over the last 4 or 5 months, especially around all the changes and supports that we've tried to implement for agencies during this, the COVID pandemic. I've tried to make sure that providers get those transmittals when they are released, but sometimes, you know, things come at us fast and furious, and I don't get those emails out to folks. Providers can access the list of transmittals at any time, and it's by calendar year by using this website address here. So that might be worth it. There's a section for information transmittals, a section for action requests, and a section for policy transmittals by calendar year. And so you definitely may want to take a look at this to see if there's policy transmittals that you've missed, or hey, I heard that they updated the policy around contingency payments or whatever the particular issue may be. You can go search to see if there is a policy transmittal out there, or if there's an upgraded worker guide on the provider resources page that will give you details on terms of how what are the new rules of engagement that we're operating under for services. So take advantage of those resources that are out there for you guys to utilize. We want to give you as much information as possible so it's easier for you guys to do your job and work in Express on a day-to-day basis. If you've accessed all that information and you still need help, you can certainly do a technical assistance request form. This is inside Express. It's under the customer service tab. Once you've logged in, it's completely secure. Because you're inside Express and you have to log in to get in there, so it's a secure system, and so you can be as candid and as detailed as you need to be, telling us what's going on. Sometimes sending an email can be kind of complicated because you want to protect client privacy through sending information by email. Doing a technical assistance request form inside Express, since we're in Express, it's secured. You can definitely be more candid and give us more details, and knowing that everything is secure inside the system and we're not going to worry about policy or privacy issues getting leaked out. So take advantage of that. And what happens with this is when you do a technical assistance request form, once that is submitted in Express, it generates what we call a service ticket on our end that then gets vetted through the technical assistance unit team. And sometimes when the issues are complicated and it's beyond what they can assist you with, those service tickets get forwarded to me or to other people to do a little bit more deeper analysis and assistance with more complex issues. And it helps us track which issues providers are having. So if we see the same issue popping up over and over again, it tells us, do we have a systems issue that we need to do a technical fix for, or is there a training issue that we need to come back and Julie needs to devise a new webinar for folks because enough people are having the same issue that maybe we need to get some additional support organized for you and offered out to you guys to help you through. Okay, so that really helps us to track what's really going on so we can be responsive to the issues that you guys are having while using the system. Okay, that was that was a down and dirty kind of fast way to talk about payments and Express at a higher level. I also wanted to share with you the help menu. Let me see if I can get into, here we go. Make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. Yep, I am. Great. So this is when you go to the external help menu, this is what it looks like. And it's organized by provider type. So you as agency providers would have your own menu option as agency providers, and then you have access to user guides and how-to guides and general information that are, again, organized by general topic area. And I organized it this way to kind of make it easier for you to find what it is you're looking for. So coming into the menu, and this is if you'd use the URL that I just talked about a few minutes ago to get to the index here. And then as you can see, for each of the guides that's blue underlined, it's a hyperlink and it opens that particular PDF document for you to view or to download and save if you want to. But it's situated and organized by topic areas. So you've got a section and subsections for around plan of care. You've got sections for other how-to stuff, like for residential claims, and you can see here there's guides on how to create and submit a regular claim, and how to create and submit an absence claim, and how to update and correct your claims. And then there's how-to guides on how to use reports, those reports that we just talked about. And then other information related to Express. You know, how do you enroll a newest Express user? How do you update your email account on your user profile, and whatnot. So there's a section on troubleshooting, you know, in terms of like, how do you submit a technical assistance or request? And what if I'm having issues with my claims? I get an error message. How do I figure out what that is? That claims problem solving matrix will do that for you. And then other general information, user enrollment forms, and there's DSP videos that are on here now for agency providers. So there's a lot of information on the Express help menu for agency providers to help you navigate Express and to get to do the work that you need to do in the system. Now, if you have run into, like I said earlier, if you run into billing issues for services delivered, I would suggest you spend some time making sure we get, there we go. Spend some time looking at the problem solving matrix docs. There's one for service delivered and there's one for claims, because each of those are processed and validated in the system individually. They each have their own problem solving matrix. And how this works is that if you have an SD billing that is suspended, the suspense error exception message is the actual text of the error message that you see in Express. And again, a lot of cases, it can be really technical language and may not be easily decipherable. So what I've tried to do is then in the next column, tell you what that technical language really means, what's really happening if you get that error. And then give you, in the final column far to the right, give you strategies on how to fix the issue to resolve that suspension error so that billing of yours or your claim will go through and process out for payment. And so it just lists individual particular error messages. Now, this is the most common error messages that you would get for service delivered. It's not every single one that's possible in the system. So if you do get an error message, suspected duplicate, there's one that you might see a lot. Hours already claimed by another provider, and then it tells you how to resolve that. So make use of this particular document. Get familiar with it. I think it will save you a lot of headaches if you have stuff that does suspend out on your SD billings and you're not sure why. This will help you find that information. And then you have more, you're armed with more information when you need to ask for assistance. The companion to that guide is one for claims. And again, it is structured in a similar manner. It gives you the exception error message on the claim, what that error message really means in regular language, and then what needs to happen or what you can do to help get the issue fixed. So the more information you are armed with to understand what's going on, that definitely helps you articulate that if you do need to ask for assistance, so we can get you the answers back or get the issue, help you get the issue resolved. For example, I mean, if we get a technical assistance request and all it says is eXPRS isn't working, I can't help you with that, with just that little of information. So that is going to cause more delay in getting it resolved, because we need to reach out to you, communicate with you about what do you mean, what part of eXPRS, what was it that you were doing, what error message did you get, and whatnot. So the more information you can provide for us when you do submit a technical assistance request, the easier it's going to be for us to help you get that resolved as quickly as possible. So these matrices may help explain what's going on. So when you do need to ask for help, you're armed with information to help that process along as quickly as possible. Okay. So I got one question that came through. Let me take a look at that. If you have questions, you can certainly send those to me using the questions option in your dashboard, your little control panel for the webinar. So feel free to do that. It says, cool, thanks, Carrie. Got one from, first one's from Carol. It says, what may be a common reason for an SD billing to be pending, particularly for professional behavior services? That's a great question, Carol. So if you have an SD billing entry that's pending, and I know professional behavior services may see that more often than other agents, regular agency services. That means that the billing has cleared all the validation edits, but it's waiting at the county or brokerage for them to review against any invoice that you may need to submit to them, or like a copy of a temporary support emergency plan or a behavior support plan or functional analysis. You may have additional documentation as a part of your professional behavior services you provided that you need to submit to the county or brokerage as your work product, as an outcome of the work that you've been doing. And so your billing is pending for the CDD per brokerage because they're waiting for that from you. And so make sure that they have that, and then they should review all of that. And then if everything that's reviewed up, if they don't have questions or whatnot, I would hope they would get in touch with you if they did. But then they would release that billing to move it out to approved, and then it would get captured in the claims aggregation process for you to get paid. So if you have a billing that's pending, that means it's waiting at the county or brokerage because they need some more, they're waiting for more information from you before they finish and approve that for payment. Carrie's got a question. She says, my client liability report looks different than yours in the demo. You had case descriptors listed for each client. I do not have those showing up. We used to get those case descriptors. Okay, great question, Carrie. I probably have not updated my screenshots since we moved to the one eligibility system that happened just recently. And so because we're getting new data from the one eligibility system, what gets displayed in eXPRS may be different. So I will need to go back through and see if those screens are changing, and if those case descriptors are available to you someplace else in the system. And if they are, I'll point you in that direction. So let me take a look at that when I get back. My PowerPoints may be a bit out of date, out of sync with what's really going on. From Sarah. Hi, Sarah. What if we received a payment for DD services, but the amount doesn't match what is on the payment detail report? That's possibly due to an external garnishment that happens outside of eXPRS. It could be due to a provider liability that may be captured in a different part of the payment detail report. I would need the specific situation to look at more specifically to find out what's going on, why things don't match up for you. And it may be that your deposit includes multiple, on the payment detail report, you have your stuff is broken out by multiple contracts, meaning multiple CDDPs and brokerages. So if you're an agency provider that works for up in the metro area, and you work with individuals that are case managed by Multnomah County, and some individuals are case managed by Washington County, and some individuals are case managed by Clackamas County, you'll have a separate section in your payment detail report for each county contract you have services authorized under. And so you may be looking at one small piece of a larger payment. So that may be another reason why things aren't matching up for you with the payment detail report. But if you wanted to do a technical assistance request form and let us know which payment issue, payment run that isn't matching up for you in the details, we can take a look and see if we can help you figure out what happened and see if we can find that information so it all matches up for you. There's a variety of reasons for that. It's hard for me to answer without knowing the specifics. But we can, if you want to send us the specifics, we'll help you figure it out for sure. Any other questions around the overview stuff we talked about? And then, oh, there's one. Hello, thank you. If an agency provider enters a date and time and then suspends entry as an error, does the provider need to do anything else as far as Express goes? If you do an SD billing entry for a date and time that you worked and that entry suspends, you can kind of let it sit out there because it may be that whole Express tried to get the eligibility information and MMIS was busy. And so Express will check again overnight. For any SD billings or claims that are suspended, Express will automatically resubmit those overnight every night to see if that reason that they suspended got cleared out. And if that suspension reason did get cleared out, like Express now can talk to MMIS and get the information it needs, then that SD billing or claim will finish the process like it needed to, maybe only a day or two later, and then process out through for payment. I would say if you have something that is suspended and it's still suspended after 2 or 3 days, then you may want to do a technical assistance request because something else may be going on that's keeping that suspension reason from clearing out in the overnight automated process. So you can, if you see something that suspends, you can resubmit it immediately if you want to, but you don't have to. You can kind of let it sit in suspended status and see if the system fixes itself overnight in the automated process. I would check back in a couple of days to see, oh, great, it's now moved to approved, it got cleared out, or wow, that one billing is still suspended and it's been a couple of days. At that point, you may want to do a technical assistance request and ask for help to see if we can figure out what's going on with why that's suspended. And it may be that there's an overlap with another provider that we need to do some coordination with. So something may need to get corrected on either end that you're not aware of because it's with another provider that's not part of your agency. So that's what I would suggest. You can let them sit and suspended for a little while, and then if it doesn't resolve in a few days, then you would need to reach out and see if we can help it along. Or if you know what you need to do to the suspended SD billing, I put 12/25, I meant to put 12/15 as the end time. You can make that correction to the time on a suspended billing like it was draft, save that new information, and then resubmit it if you need to make corrections. You can also do that. It depends on the situation. But if you need to make corrections to your suspended billings, that's something you certainly can do. And there's a how-to guide on the help menu that should walk you through the process on how to make those corrections if needed. Any other questions for the overview portion? If not, we'll move on to the provider liability and claim and client liability presentation. Okay, let's do that. So we talked about payments in general, and we had one come in from Michelle. Okay. What phone number is best to use to reach out by an IDD provider organization? I actually don't have a phone number for you. Part of the problem with that is that all of us are working from home, and so we are not in the office to answer the phones. If you're needing assistance, the best method would be to do a technical assistance request or submit an email to info.express@state.or.us. COVID's making phone support a bit more challenging since the majority of us aren't even working in the office these days. So I apologize, I'm not able to give you a phone number because I have no idea who it would be. Okay, let's talk about Express provider and client liabilities. I mentioned these briefly in the first presentation, as these are the reasons that your payments could be reduced. And so since that's important, we want you to get paid as much as possible for the services you're providing. We want to talk about what are the reasons why your payments would be reduced. So Express as a system has a liabilities processing function. Express liabilities, and what they are amounts that are used to reduce payments to providers to recover funds that you owe the state back, and so or funds that you should not be receiving from the state. And there's two types of liabilities in Express. There is the provider liability amount or account, and the acronym for that's PLA. And then there's the client liability amount or accounts, and that acronym is CLA. And we'll talk about each of these individually. So let's start with the provider liability or the PLA. So a PLA is created when an approved claim that has been paid to you is then later voided or corrected. It's already been approved, you've already been paid, you've received the money, but then somewhere several months down the line, oops, we needed to fix something on that. The amount of that voided or corrected claim is held in a system account as money owed back to DHS or ODHS, Oregon DHS. And then your future claims that are processed for payment back to you will be reduced by those PLA amounts that you owe us back. So we're just going to recover that money back from your future payments, because that PLA can be considered possibly as like an advance that we'll need then recover from future payments. Now, the interesting thing about PLA that makes things super confusing, which I apologize for that. I'll do my best to help not make it confusing. But depending on the action taken on the paid claim, whether it was straight voided or voided as part of a corrections process, may impact your PLA and the balance that you owe to be recovered. It may be possible that a PLA is created, but you ultimately don't owe anything. And we'll talk about those individual scenarios here as we go through. Now, if you just void a paid claim, just straight out void it, the system assumes that the claim was paid to you in error and should never have been paid, and you owe us back all of that money. So if you got paid for a $100 claim and you just void it, we assume the whole $100 is something you shouldn't have been paid, and now you owe us back. And so that PLA, the provider liability amount that's created, will be for the total amount of that voided claim that will need to be recovered from a future payment. So if you like visuals, because I'm a visual person, here's some graphics to kind of help visually explain what's going on. You had a paid claim for $100. You received that $100. You later then voided that whole claim for whatever reason. That means the system is going to create a provider liability amount for you in the amount of that $100. Now you get to keep that $100 you were paid, because we're going to recover it back from a future payment. You don't need to now write us a check for the $100. You keep the money. We'll just account for it in the system and then hold it back from your future payments, since you already have the money. Now, the correction of a paid claim is a little different than a straight void. If you corrected a paid claim, the process is that that original claim is voided, but a new claim is immediately created to replace it. And so the old voided claim and the new replacement claim are linked in the system. The system knows that they are attached to each other, that one is a replacement of the other. And then depending on the amount of the new replacement claim, you may not have a PLA balance owing at all. Now, if the new replacement claim that's linked to the old one that was voided, if that new claim is less than the old claim that was corrected and voided, then the PLA balance you owe is the difference between the two. If the new replacement claim is more than the old claim that you corrected, then you will not have a PLA balance owing. The system owes you money because you were underpaid, and then will generate you a second payment for that additional amount difference that you're owed. So let's look at these a little bit. I need to reorder my slides. So remembering the claim, the original claim was $100. If it got straight voided, then the PLA is $100. But if your original claim was $100 and it was voided as part of the corrections process, your PLA will be $100 briefly until the new replacement claim that comes through that's linked to that old claim. Now, in this situation, that new replacement claim is less than the original claim. So the PLA creates for the original claim of $100. Your new claim comes in for $75. That gets processed against your PLA of $100. You already have that money, but we're not going to pay you for that $75 claim. Instead, we're going to adjust the amount that you owe us down to the new balance, the difference between the old claim and the new claim. So the PLA that you truly owe us is $25 because the new corrected claim utilized the majority of the PLA that was created by the old claim. If we do the same logic, if your new claim is more than your old claim, remember the old claim was $100, the new replacement claim was $175. That new claim is processed against the PLA, which is only $100. We underpaid you. We should have paid you $175, but we only paid you $100. So then we're going to issue you a new second payment for that additional $75 that we owe you to make up the true correct total of $175. And then your PLA is going to get zeroed out. You don't owe us any money. We actually owed you money in that situation. So that's kind of how the new claim is less than the old claim. New claim is more than the old claim results in a PLA that you balance that you actually will have impacting future payments in visuals. Now that's talking about claims like for residential services. Well, what about for plan of care services that you have to do SD billings for? You can't void those claims or correct those plan of care claims because you didn't create them. The system created them on your behalf. So for payment corrections for plan of care services, the piece that you correct is the actual service delivered billing entries. So if you have, remember, a plan of care claim is a collection of all those individual billings for the dates and times you provided service. If you have a billing that's wrong, then you would void that billing, create a new replacement billing if there's one that's needed, and then that SD billing correction work is what triggers eXPRS to correct and reprocess the associated claims. And so in that process, there is an old claim that's voided and a new claim that's immediately linked to it that's a correction. And so depending on if the SDs remaining in any new replacement SDs that come through that get gathered up into that new claim total more than the original claim that was voided, then you get into, do you have a liability amount that needs to be reduced from future, that will be used to reduce from future claimants, or Were you underpaid? And then this Express needs to send you a second supplemental payment to make up that full total that you should have been paid in the first place before the correction. Also, something to think about with service delivered billing entries is that if you void a service delivered billing entry, say you have a billing for 3.5 hours of job coaching, and you void that billing for 3.5 hours, that releases that 3.5 hours back into the bucket of available hours that the individual has for that service date period of time. The hours aren't duplicatively taken away from the person's plan. If you have an SD billing that's voided, then that time, those units, be it hours or miles, are released back and available in that individual's plan once the SD is voided. Screens there. So for provider liability balances that are owed, after that claims correction process is completed, that balance owing, those amounts are recovered from agency providers at 100% of that balance amount from future claims paid to your agency. So if you have a really large PLA and you have a series of small claims, you may not get paid for a while until that large PLA balance is zero, and then payments will continue from that point forward. But if you have a small PLA balance and your next claim is a large amount, then you may not notice much of a difference because maybe we're only taking $50 out of a $5,000 payment because your PLA balance was only $50. So it really depends on how much your PLA is, how much are your future payments that are going to be used to recover it, and how that will impact your cash flow coming out. Another thing to keep in mind for agency providers is that PLA balances that are owing to you are owed to you as an agency overall. So claims from different clients, claims from different services can be used to recover PLA balances created by claims from other individuals. For example, a balance owing from Sam's claim that was voided can be recovered from a new future claim from Mary. So it's not client specific, it's not service specific, it's not CDDP or brokerage specific. It's all to you as a global agency, which can be kind of confusing to track down. If you need help with that, we can certainly help you with that. Try to chase down how those connections are made. Again, like I said in the earlier presentation, you can see your provider liability information in terms of how much has been deducted from a payment and for which claims were impacted by that deduction by using the payment detail report. And again, for a payment that has a liability recovered, you went from the summary portion of the report, you click on the PLA detail link, and that takes you to a sub-report where you can see the original claim, in this case that's outlined in red, that Sam's claim that was voided, and that amount that was the PLA amount created from Sam's claim was recovered and held back out of Mary's new claim that was a future claim processed. So you can see which one was voided and which claim. And in some cases, there may be multiple new claims that are used to recover a single PLA amount. It just really depends on how much the PLA is and what's the amount of the other claims that are the future claims that are being used to recover that. You can also go into eXPRS and view your provider liability information as an agency directly in eXPRS. You don't have to get to it through a report. You can just do a simple query of your provider liability information. And to do that is under the left-hand menu, you have an option for liabilities. And then from the flyout, select provider liability. And then, oops, my picture cut off. you would do View PLA. And then under the provider liability search page that you get to, you can use the various criteria options there to search for a specific liability account or a date range or by a client or a service or whatever you need. And then the results that you get at the bottom are all the provider liability accounts that match that search criteria. The blue number on the far left is that each provider liability account has its own ID number. If you open that up, you click on that to open it, you view the specific details as to which claim was reversed that created the liability. And then under adjustments down below, you can see which claim or claims that liability amounts were used to recover that liability account from. So it gives you an itemized, here's the claim that created this liability, and then here's the subsequent future claims that we used to recover portions or all of that liability amount. And so you can take a look at that yourself if you need to. And again, these screens can be kind of confusing. So if you need assistance looking through these, certainly do a technical assistance request and we can do our best to give you that support. Okay, so I had a couple questions come through about provider liabilities. Let's talk about those questions before we move to client liabilities. From Jonathan, thank you. Any best practice recommendations? When is it best to void claims? When is it best to correct claims? I would say the best time to void a claim is as soon as you realize that something is wrong and you need to void it. It is possible that you can void a claim before it goes through the payment process. Through what we call SFMA, and then hopefully if you do that, it may not kick into a liability because we haven't actually paid you for it. But that may be difficult to determine. It's definitely, if you see a claim that needs corrected or voided, it's best to get that work done as quickly as possible, primarily because of those payment timelines that CMS has. And so if you let something go a lot longer than it should to make a correction, it's potential that you let it go long so far that we can't do a correction, or it's so far outside the window to rebill for that service that we can't pay you again for the service. We can't do a new claim because it's outside of those payment timelines. So definitely, as the sooner the better. So as soon as you find that something needs to be voided or corrected, get it done as quickly as possible to give us and give the system enough time to get any corrections or replacement claims or replacement billings put in the system to make those adjustments to you. Really, because if you're underpaid, you don't want something going so long that is outside the timelines. We can't pay you the amount that you're owed. And definitely, if you're overpaid, you don't want things going gathering up, so then the liability could be bigger than what you need, than what you had intended to have to repay back. So the sooner you can get those claims corrected, or the better. Kathy, thank you. Can you talk about the contingency payments for July and August, and which report would provide this detail? Great question. I don't know that the reports themselves will specifically highlight what payments are for your contingency payments and what payments are not. I don't know if those reports will be that specific, but I do have a how-to guide around for you to find those contingency payment information and the claims themselves. And so I will send that how-to guide to you guys all after this session, so you have that available, so you can go in and look for those contingency payment claims and make sure that they're lining up with what you expect to be paid. Since we just finished with August, I don't know how soon they'll get those contingency payments for August services. process, because I know they need to look back at what you had billed for that service month, and then there's math involved that's outside of my purview in terms of determining what your supplemental contingency payment would be. But we need to do that after a period of time, so you have time to get all your billings in for August to do that. So I know there's formulas and there's policies around how all of that works. And I can send you the how-to guide that I have available that'll show you how you can go find out those payments in Express yourself. All right, let's talk about client liabilities. So for those individuals that have a client liability, it's also, like I said, called a service contribution or an offset. They are required to pay towards the cost of their residential services, meaning group homes, foster homes, or supported living. Those are the three services that are impacted by a service contribution or an offset for an individual. This is an amount that the individual or the representative payee pays directly to you, the provider, in addition to paying you for their monthly room and board. And again, that's all part of contributing. It's a Medicaid regulation for contributing and participating in Medicaid funded services. Some individuals are exempt from paying towards the cost of their care, and those individuals are ones that have an medical financial eligibility for SSI. So anybody that's eligible to receive SSI or via themselves just because of their income, or they're a disabled adult child, or eligible through the Pickle Amendment, or are part of the Employed Persons with Disabilities program, that gives them that SSI eligibility, which makes them exempt from paying towards the cost of their care. Individuals that get just Social Security disability, or perhaps veterans because from their parents, or railroad payments because of their parents, that are not eligible in receiving SSI, those are the individuals that are going to have a service contribution towards the cost of their care each month. Now, that your residential service provider claims are reduced each month by that client liability amount for the individual. And the client liability amount is applied to the first claim or claims processed for the individual for that service month. And I apologize, the people outside are being loud. What that means is the client, Medicaid is always the payer of last resort. They're fixing the sidewalk outside my house. So Medicaid is always the payer of last resort. So the individual has to contribute to the cost of their care first, which means that is reduced off their first claim for that service month. Once that client liability amount has been accounted for, then Express will start issuing you payment for the remainder of the individual's monthly service cost. So between their Express payment and the client liability amount you collect from the individual or their payee will equal the total monthly rate for the cost of service for that particular service month. So if an individual has a client liability amount, it needs to be paid to the provider in order for you to receive 100% of their service rate payment for that month. The monthly residential service rate entered in Express is 100% of the monthly rate that's assessed for the individual based on the particular assessment tool that's in place for that service. And counties should not inflate the rate entered in Express by the CLA amount, or should manually reduce or prorate the rate for the CLA amount. Express handles all of that proration stuff. And you definitely want the individual's rate authorized in an Express is their authorized rate. And if they have a client liability, Express will adjust payments for that. And the reason that we don't want to mess with that and allow Express to do that math itself is if in some cases the liability is calculated for an individual and it shouldn't have been, once that liability gets corrected to zero, Express will initiate a payment for that amount that you should have been paid, so the provider gets the full amount. If the county or brokerage has or CDDP has manipulated the rate authorized for the residential service by that CLA amount, that throws that whole payment adjustment stuff that Express works with. It throws it off, and so we get inaccurate payments, and we don't want to have that happen. So you can use the client liability report like I talked about, or you can actually go into Express and view the client liability directly. And this may be where you can see those case descriptors, Carrie. So this may be the other place you can find that information. But to view a specific client liability, from the left-hand menu, you're going to click on Liabilities, Client Liability, and then View Client Liability to get to that view screen. And then you can search by specific prime number. You can search by an effective service date range. In this case, I'm searching for the month of May. And by service element, you can select that. And so we have the liability account, client liability account showing here for Ray for $275. And if you click on his name, which is blue, meaning it's a hyperlink, you can then open up that specific account and see how much of his client liability balance will need to be collected from him. And I think it still lists those case descriptors for you, Kathy. You may need to go in and check to make sure that this screen, this screen may be old as well. I don't think, but hopefully not. But if you're not seeing the case descriptors on the report, you may be able to see them on the specific view client liability pages in Express if you need to see those, which help tell you if the person's eligible for food stamps or whatnot. Again, you can use the client liability report, like we talked about in the earlier presentation. From liabilities, there's an option for reports. It's also under the reports menu. You can get at it from both places. View client liability report. You can search by service month. And then again, it comes back with the report like we showed in the earlier presentation with the amount per individual. Although the report screen here may be out of date, I may need to update it if what Carrie was saying was accurate, which I don't doubt that it. I think she probably is very accurate if she's using this report. So check that out, and you may have to communicate with the individual or their payee to make sure that you're getting the correct liability amount in addition to the room and board each month. Okay, so that's kind of in a nutshell how client liabilities and provider liabilities work. So do we have more questions on this? I kind of addressed a couple of the provider liability questions when they came through. Any other questions about liability stuff? If not, that's the end of the information that I had to present to you guys. I do appreciate your time very much. Again, if you have questions or need assistance with stuff, do not hesitate to reach out either through the technical assistance request, or via email to info.express. We will do our best to get you the support and resources that you need. Also, take advantage of everything that's on the help menu. There's lots and lots of information out there, so hopefully those resources will be useful for you in navigating through the system. And I definitely want to thank everybody for your time today. I do apologize for the city working on the sidewalks out front of my house. That's been kind of annoying, but I appreciate everybody's patience with that. And definitely thank you all for all the work that you do every day to support the clients you serve. You do important work, and it's very much appreciated by me and everybody at ODDS, I am sure. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody a happy September. Hopefully fall will bring good things to you, and I will catch you next time. Thank you.